Hello and welcome back to the strategy course. Now what we're going to be discussing is imitation, or actually how to protect from imitation. Back to the definition of a competitive advantage. A company is better than other companies' competitors at satisfying customers. Sustainable competitive advantage. In addition to being better, it is difficult for competitors to imitate and substitute the sources of advantage. That's what we're discussing now. How do you prevent such imitation? So with this, we get deeper into a story of intellectual property. Assets, knowledge. Knowledge that basically becomes an asset that can be protected if you go through the registration process. And that can give you an ability not only to create your advantage, but also an ability to exclude others from abusing and imitating what you're doing. And then what we're going to discuss is the two sides of this relationship. If you have intellectual property, what are your options? If you don't have intellectual property, what are your strategic options? It's basically two sides of a coin, but multiple options beyond the typical, oh, they're copying, therefore send the lawyers and try to prevent them from doing so. So before that, let's go back to the definition of intellectual property, creation of the minds. Anything that you find creative, it's going to be different, then you can use it in commerce. And the idea here is all of this is about knowledge. Knowledge is a special type of asset because it is different from physical ones in which you can exclude others from using it through separation. Once you provide somebody with an idea, well, they have the idea. There isn't really anything else that you can do to try to make them unlearn it. And as a result, we have a particular type of protection for this. Within that, intellectual property, which is the, if you want, a formal register, legalized protection. Of course, there is also trade secrecy, which is the other way to protect the intellectual property. You know something, you don't tell anybody, you just use it over and over again. And in some cases, you don't know how to explain it, so it's much more difficult for others to do the same thing. But leaving that aside, let's go back to the formal, the legal protection of intellectual property, two different types, industrial property and copyright. What is the difference? Copyright mostly is a story of something that is going to be creative. It doesn't have to be a usefulness, but it's basically, oh, this is new, this is different, and there is some kind of appeal for a particular group of individuals. And with this, what we are talking about is you get the protection once you create it. Of course, it is always better if you register, because then it's just easier to clarify when you started, when you created this, and then it's easier to defend. But in any case, you're going to get this type of protection. Industrial property different because you have to show, you have to prove that, yes, it's not only creative, but also there is some level of solutions and usefulness for this piece of knowledge that deserves the protection by the government or legal protection. Different types, patents, utility models, trademarks, industrial designs, and geographic indications of origin. So with this, let's go deeper into the different types. So industrial property, patents. This is what typically comes to mind when we are talking about industrial property. You have an exclusive right. You can prevent others from using your knowledge. You're disclosing it when you register. And then government decides, oh, this is novel. It's not obvious. And there is some kind of usefulness to it. And as a result, we are going to give you some monopoly rights to recompense you for your inventiveness. With this, the story is exclusive rights, usually 20 years. And this is something that you have to apply to a local office. The United States, European Union, or country level. You can also apply to multiple countries to basically strengthen your protection across the globe. But for the most part, once you apply, you get a degree of protection in other locations because you can establish that I created this, I was granted the novelty, the usefulness. The other important thing is, yes, final one, the subject matter needs to be patented, patentable. Once upon a time, biological entities were not. Now we have decided that yes, actually we can patent plants, we can patent animals, we can patent some genes, the way that we are going to apply them. There is some degree of intellectual property of creating genetically modified organisms, and as a result, they are going to be protected. But with this, patents, novelty, usefulness, 20 years. Different from, before that, are all of these going to be big, earth-shattering inventions? These are inventions, they are not innovations. They are innovations when you find a market for the products. There is some creativity. These are a few examples that were coming. Anti-eating face mask, animal ear protectors, greenhouse helmet, or sled bands. We can debate whether there is some market for any of these, but the idea is it is novel, it is not obvious, it is useful, so therefore you do get a patent, and from there you get the protection. So the next level, in utility models. Different from patents, and the degree of innovativeness is not as high, and as a result, the number of years that you can enjoy the protection is shorter. But one important thing is this is not universal. Some countries allow this. And in some cases, patent disputes are on the basis of, look, you are imitating my product. This is just an extension of what I have created. But in this country, there is a protection to the extension over previous innovation. So you might get some type of discussion, but the idea here is much lower set of requirements, and of course, fewer years for this. Very aligned, both of them, patents and petty patents, if you want. Industrial design is different, in the sense that this is not just the novelty and usefulness, but it makes things look better. It does create an appeal to the product, and therefore we are going to reward you for making it just have this special appearance. The notion here is you are going to have some creative, and on top of that, usefulness to that innovation. We are going to give you a degree of protection, 5 years, and then you can renew up to 15 years. So yes, novelty and appeal that makes it better, and it does get some degree of protection. Trademarks, different from the previous ones, these can be protected forever, as long as you use them and keep paying for the annual fees. This is a reward for creating a reputation. The trademark is a sign, a combination of signs, symbols that basically make your product recognizable. And as a result, the notion is, look, we associate it with a particular type of product, quality, if you want. Therefore, we are going to give you the right to use it. If you look at sports companies, Adidas has 3 stripes, Nike has a swoosh. Not very complicated, but when you see it, you can recognize the logo, you can recognize the company, and that creates attractiveness for the particular products in certain markets or certain market segments. It can also not only have to be a company, it can also be a collection of companies. Woolmark, you can see the logo for this is made out of wool, and it's a way to recognize very quickly that this particular product or service has a particular level of quality. It's a story of reputation, but again, different from the others, protection forever. Geographical indications of origin, something similar. It's not specific to a company, but all companies in a particular location are going to benefit from this particular characteristic, and therefore they have invested, not only maybe these companies, but the previous generations of companies, they have invested in creating a reputation, and we are going to provide a degree of protection. Champagne, with champagne, sparkling white wine, which happens to be produced under a certain method in a region of France, and therefore there is a recognition that, well, they did create this reputation, and there is a level of protection. So the notion here is companies in that location can benefit from this protection, which is a reward for the reputation they have created. And then copyright, different from industrial property. And this is just something creative. It doesn't have to be useful. You basically get it once you create the idea. But of course, you can always, it's better if you apply for protection. So if you register so that you get the protection. And this varies across countries, 50 years after the death of the creator, but there is some variation across different countries. So what can you do to protect your intellectual property? Typically, they are misusing our logo, they are using our patents, send the lawyers, give them a big lawsuit. Yes, that's one traditional one. Let's go deeper and think about many others. Exercise market power. This is basically exclude others from using it. If I created intellectual property, I can also sell it. I can license it, which is I give somebody the right to use it for a fee. I can collaborate with others to try to build it together, or I can just donate it for everybody to use. So going deeper into each of them, I have the intellectual property, I can exercise the market power, I can exclude others. It's simpler, it helps me basically continue with my protection. It might undermine competitors, of course. You need to pay lawyers, patent lawyers. We're going to be prosecuting this. It's going to be costly. It might take time to go through this. And maybe that is pushing others to create their own alternative intellectual property, substitute the patents for others that basically give them the same functionality. So maybe it's not going to be that great because I'm going to all of a sudden have more competition. So, well, I could use alternatives, could sell it. I don't know what to do with it. I am an innovator. I built something new. I have the resources, the capabilities to exploit the intellectual property. So, okay, I just sell it to somebody. Of course, the question here is, how much is this worth? Remember those patents that we saw before. How big is the market? Can you give me prototypes and see whether there is really a need for this particular product? There is always this story of uncertainty on the value of this. Then there is the story of licensing. Yes, if I want to use that intellectual property, I can use it myself and then give others the right to use it as well. What's good about it? I'm going to get all these royalties, and isn't it going to be great? I also have control, and I can basically build more demand for these products because everybody is using my intellectual property. I make it into a standard, and then I can continue basically improving, upgrading it. Of course, you are giving others knowledge. Maybe they learn, and then maybe they are basically building future competitors. Then you can also collaborate with others. You can develop intellectual property. You set a standard. Everybody benefits from using the same standard, and then you incentivize collaboration, and then can learn from others. They have other innovations like mine, and then together we can do so much better. This is the story of open innovation, which builds a bigger market. Of course, the limitations. You're sharing your knowledge. You are not going to have full control over the new innovations, the new ideas, the new inventions that are coming out of this. And then finally, you can choose to donate your intellectual property in the sense that you're going to take the idea and think that, well, this is good for everybody to know. I'm not interested in making money out of it, so I'm just going to donate it. So it builds a reputation. Everybody's going to have access to it. So it's a signal that we are trying to do something better. Of course, you are not recovering your investment, and you are just helping competitors by giving knowledge away for free. But some individuals have this idea that it is good for society. Wikipedia, if you want, it's a nice example of building intellectual property knowledge and then just distributing it for free for others to use. Then these are the options for the ones, the individuals, the companies that control the intellectual property. What happens when you don't control intellectual property? What can you do? So again, here we have multiple options. You can try to assert a legal privilege. You develop alternatives, you substitute, you get permission. It's a licensing story. Patent, which is trying to avoid intellectual property battles by controlling or alternative intellectual property. And then you can get into rapid dissemination so that everybody has it, and then it is no longer that novel. So asserting the legal privilege, you challenge that this is actually intellectual property that is worth protecting. With this, if you are successful, well, it's open space. Now everybody can basically start operating here, but it's going to be costly. You are trying to challenge that they are should be given this intellectual property. It might be difficult. This is getting the lawyers involved. So that is, if you want that story that maybe you were trying too hard, and actually, yes, that should be, that patent should be held in court because there is a novelty and it is not obvious. Alternatively, well, if they have a strong protection of intellectual property, I can build my own. I can build my own reputation. Yes, I was building on their trademark. I can build my own trademark. I was using maybe some of their ideas containing a patent. Can I find an alternative way to get the same thing? So you just basically avoid legal battles. You have to be successful in building that invention and then basically try to separate and acknowledge that, look, this is not imitation. I was using a different process. Yes, end result might be similar, but the process by which I arrive at it is very different. You can, and this is a simpler way, you get permission, you get a license, you pay, of course, for that ability to access somebody else's knowledge. Is simpler, it is clear, it is fast. You get into, if you want a simpler life, of course, you are going to be depending on others. And then there is a story of that hunt. You build or you buy a patent portfolio, and this is mostly to avoid somebody suing you. Typically in high-tech products that are built on lots of different knowledge components, and yes, I have this patent over this little piece of knowledge, I'm going to start suing everybody. Well, if you also have, I also have lots of patents. If you sue me, I sue you as a tit for tat. So it's basically, look, let's be nice to each other. We are building on a community. So if you are trying to nitpick on this particular piece of knowledge, I can also try to do the same thing. Why don't we just try to help each other? The challenge, of course, is that you might have to end up buying patents that you don't really need, but it's in case somebody sues you, you can basically countersue. And then rapid dissemination, make this a standard. So it's just, well, everybody's using this. You're no longer the story of novelty and the exclusivity no longer applies because this is pretty much completely diffused. It's a generic term. It is a generic concept. So there is no need to basically provide protection here. In some cases, it can work so that particular name, sorry, a particular name, you can argue that, well, this is just a generic name. They should not be given a trademark for it. Everybody calls it this particular name, so why not just basically and get rid of the protection given to the trademark. Of course, with this, we understand imitation better. We understand the challenge of imitation and how to protect from it. Thinking about intellectual property, inventions of the mind, something that it's going to be novel, it's different, and it is going to be worthy of legal protection. You can always go through trade secrets, which is how most of the knowledge is protected, but then you can always go to the explicit knowledge, reveal it, and then ask the government to basically give you that protection. Two different types, copyright versus industrial property. Copyright, it is creative, you get automatic protection. Industrial property, it is novel and it has to be useful and you have to apply for protection and you're going to get it for some period of time. For patents and utility models and industrial designs, for trademarks and geographical indications of origin, you get it forever as long as you are using it and paying the fees. And then how do you protect it? Depending on who you are, whether you have the IP or whether you are the one who needs IP, and you are going to get into not only exercising market power, sending the lawyers, that's the typical approach. Also, you can sell, you can license, you can collaborate, ordinate. And then for the non-IP holders, what can you do? Well, you can challenge that particular patent, you can develop alternatives, substitute, you can get permission, licensing, defend, getting other patents, or get into rapid dissemination. And that's all. Thank you very much for listening.